What's up, savvy expats? One of, if not the most daunting part about daily life in the Philippines that you may encounter as an expat is using the public transportation system in this country. And I mean, rightfully so. Have you seen the chaotic traffic here? You may ask yourself questions like, what's the safest form of transportation? How do I avoid getting scammed and overcharged? Where do I find the bus and jeepney stops? So on and so forth. Well, rest assured, in this guide, I'm giving you the full breakdown of the ins and outs of using the public transportation in the Philippines. Alright, without wasting time, let's get into it. So, the first and most common form of transportation that you'll likely use as an expat in this country is taxis. Just like any other country, taxis are the most easily accessible vehicle to get around, especially in the cities. It doesn't matter where you are. As long as you're in a city, you should have no problem hailing down a taxi to pick you up curbside. However, you will have those days where you try your luck getting a taxi and it's a no-go. Either they already have a rider or you just plain and simple can't find a taxi. In that case, I would recommend going to the heart of your city or the nearest mall, as that's a common pickup and drop-off point for taxis. Take me, for example. I live in BGC, and one place I can be assured to find a taxi is at SM Ora. Most SMs around the Philippines commonly have pickup and drop-off points for taxi drivers waiting to find someone to hail them down for a ride. Now, with that being said, let's discuss taxi fare prices, which can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So, if a taxi driver is trying to squeeze the most out of you, they'll likely give you foreigners two options. Either one, they use the meter, or two, they insist you pay a flat rate. In my experience, especially when speaking English, they insist you pay a flat rate to get the most out of you, that you pay more. Obviously, they're not clueless. If they know that using the meter will get you to pay 200 pesos by the end of the ride, then in the beginning of the ride, they'll insist you pay a flat rate of around 300 pesos or even more than that. Now, while I know it's not much of a difference, only $2, if this continues to happen, it can really add up over time. That being said, my advice to you is that you request to use the meter. Which, speaking of, that brings us to the question, how much is the fare when using the meter? Well, there's a requisite flag down fee of 40 pesos, with the succeeding kilometers costing you 13 pesos per kilometer. In addition to that, there's a travel duration rate of 2 pesos per minute. That's great and all, but in layman's terms, a 5-minute drive will cost you around 85 to 110 pesos. Or in other words, $2 to get you from BGC to Makati, for example. Now, let's say you want to get a little bit further. A ride from Manila Airport to Makati, for example. Well, a 10-minute ride like that will cost you around 200 to 250 pesos. Or, in other words, $4 to $5 for a 10-minute ride without traffic. So, now you got an idea of what a taxi fare would cost in the Philippines. But I would be lying to you if I said that taxis are the safest, most ideal form of transportation in the Philippines, because it's not. Sure, it's convenient, it's accessible, and it's inexpensive. But savvy expats, I want you to be aware, especially as foreigners, that there are a lot of greedy drivers out there. For one, many taxi drivers, even if they get the slightest hint that you're not from here, will try their best to overcharge you. And secondly, what I personally find the biggest travesty, the Philippine heat will roast you inside because the AC in most taxis are very weak. However, if you don't mind most of those things, taxis aren't that bad in most cases. But if you want to be on the safe end, then in that case, I would recommend you use the Grab app. It's easy to book a ride, and in less than 5 minutes, the app will typically find a driver for you with a set price already. It really takes the guessing out of potentially getting overcharged, and also you almost always have a more comfortable ride as opposed to a taxi. Now, on a side note, savvy expats, something that you may have noticed is that for the past 3 months I have been gone, and it's only now that I'm back to posting. And that's because lately I've been working on a guide from my favorite city in the Philippines, which I personally live in, BGC. And so if you're interested in learning or choosing to move to where I personally chose to live in the Philippines, BGC, the link in the guide is down below. In this guide, we provide you with everything you need to know about the city. So whether you're trying to narrow down your thought process as to where to move in the Philippines, or you just want to see what the city has to offer, this guide answers all of your questions. It really speaks for itself, so if you're interested, feel free to check out our website, thesavvyexpat.com. Alright, enough of that, let's get on to our next point, shall we? So, speaking of comfortability, the second form of transportation is the opposite of that, which is jeepneys. Jeepneys are an iconic vehicle that have become a symbol of the Philippines. it's no doubt that it's both the most popular and cheapest form of transportation in the Philippines. Almost everywhere you go, you'll not only see, but most especially hear, these large vehicles that have been converted from US military jeeps into buses. On average, most short jeepney rides will cost around 9 to 25 pesos. It's 9 pesos for the first 3 kilometers and 1 peso for the succeeding kilometers. And all jeepneys run back and forth on their respective routes for the day. You can find these routes on the side of the jeepney. If you see on the side of a jeepney that it stops at your destination, then you'll flag one down and then hop in the back. So now that you're in the jeepney, let's talk a little bit about jeepney etiquette. Essentially, there is none. You'll notice that jeepneys are like a can of sardines packing in as many people as possible that are going to work. The only etiquette that I have for you is to say para when you want the driver to stop. And then you'll pass your fare to the person next to you, who will then pass it along until it reaches the driver. So obviously it's an interesting form of transportation if you're not from here. However, it is daily life for most locals. But a quick tip to keep in mind, if you hop on a jeepney, it's best to stay on the back of the bus. 2 reasons. 1, if you're sitting in the front of the bus, you'll spend the majority of your ride passing along everybody's fare to the driver. And 2, if you sit in the back, you can easily hop off the jeepney without having to squeeze through such a cramped and sweaty space. Yes, it's the cheapest form of transportation, but it's also the most uncomfortable one. The only time that I personally rode a jeepney was just to get the authentic Philippine experience. Other than that, once you've rode them, the appeal quickly wears off, especially if you have to use them to commute every day like most locals. Why? Well, they're extremely crowded, cramped, hot, sweaty, and with it being a loud diesel vehicle, passengers leave shrouded in exhaust fumes. Let's just say if you have a business meeting, don't take the jeepney. If I'm gonna be honest with you savvy expats, I'm probably gonna end off every point just by saying take Grab instead. I do believe, generally speaking, that it's the best form of transportation to get around, but that's just me personally. However, you are here after all to learn about public transportation, so on to the next one. Now, at number 3 on our list, we have tricycles. If you've been to Thailand and you've rode a tuk-tuk, then you can call tricycles the cousin of that because it's very similar. Tricycles are basically motorcycles with a makeshift sidecar. Sounds nerve-wracking just thinking about riding in it, huh? So while jeepneys and taxis are the main form of transportation in the cities, in the provinces, the tricycles are king. Since tricycles are prohibited from riding on the highways and they're also better for short distances, I found that on my recent trip to Siargao, that was all we rode. Whether it be going to the nearest beach or going to a cafe across the town in General Luna, they're almost everywhere you go, so it's quite easy to flag one down. Now when it comes to determining the tricy fares, it can be quite tricky. As a general rule, they're cheaper than taxis but more expensive than jeepneys. That being said, how do you know how much you need to pay and also avoid getting overcharged? Well, depending on where you live in the Philippines, most tricycles will cost no less than 10 pesos and no more than 200 pesos. And in most cases, you and your tricy driver will agree upon a set price before setting off to your destination. But all in all, especially compared to most taxi drivers, tricycle drivers don't overcharge nearly as often. Now, moving on to our 4th form of transportation to get around in the Philippines, specifically in Manila, that is the MRT or the Metro Rail Transit Corporation. The 2 main railway systems that make up the transportation system in Manila is the MRT and the LRT. The difference between these 2 railway systems are the companies running them and their routes. The MRT, for example, is a privately ran company, while the LRT is ran by the Philippine government. But whether you take the MRT or the LRT, the convenience of taking the railway system is top-notch as you get to bypass traffic-ridden Manila. However, with a convenience like this, plus very affordable prices, expect hundreds of thousands of people to take the MRT on a weekly basis. Now, you may be wondering how much tickets are to get from one major point of Manila to another. Well, depending on your destination, a single journey MRT ticket will cost you from 13 pesos to 28 pesos for your fare. That's only 13 cents to 50 cents for a single commute. Talk about bang for your buck. So now that we got the fare price covered, allow me to walk you through how to take the MRT. So the first thing you'll have to do is pass through the security check. Unless you're carrying some suspicious items on you, I expect most of you guys can handle this step. The second thing you'll need to do is secure a train ticket. Tickets can be purchased at manned ticket stations or at automated vending machines at the station. And so it's either you buy a single journey ticket or a stored value ticket. A single journey ticket is a one-time use ticket that's valid only on the day of purchase. It ranges from 13 to 28 pesos depending on your starting and ending station. A stored value ticket, on the other hand, is a multiple use card that costs 100 pesos and can be used for 3 months. Next, you'll tap your card on the designated space on the turnstile and then enter your station. And once you've boarded the train, you simply settle down in the place you want to be and wait for the driver to announce your stop. There are also name signs that you can see at every station. Now, before we end, it's important to note that though taking the MRT is very cheap and relatively fast, it gets extremely hectic. Needless to say, try to do everything in your power to avoid rush hour if you do take the MRT. Whether it be in the morning 6 to 10 a.m. or after work hours 4 to 8 p.m., taking the MRT is not ideal during rush hour. With that being said, travel time is greatly extended when there's a lot of passengers on board. Not to mention, with no air conditioning and a very cramped space, it can get very hot as well. Moving on to the fifth form of transportation in the Philippines, that is simply taking the bus. When you hear the phrase a coach bus, it may conjure up some images of a battered Greyhound bus. But because coach buses are the primary means of inner-city transit in this country, many popular bus companies feature onboard attendants. This means that depending on the bus that you book, you'll get comfortable seats, air conditioning, and a relatively comfortable experience. A bus fare in Manila will cost you around 8 pesos for the first 4 kilometers, and then there's a fixed fee of 1.5 pesos for every other succeeding kilometer. So, depending on the distance of your trip, a bus fare can cost you anywhere from 100 to 400 pesos. Now, moving on to the sixth means of transportation, which is also my personal favorite, that is Grab. Grab is basically like the Uber of Southeast Asia. Yes, I know that this isn't a public form of transportation, but I figured that I'll still include it as this is a full guide at the end of the day. Grab, in my personal opinion, is all around the best form of transportation. Unlike dealing with taxi drivers, you're given a set price as soon as a driver accepts your booking. This way, you don't have to worry about unpredictable rates and being overcharged. Not to mention the convenience of being able to book from your phone, and having a driver pull up right where you are is a luxury in and of itself. You don't have to wait in the rain looking for your driver, nor do you have to scavenge around the city looking for an unoccupied ride. But perhaps the biggest plus for you expats is the safety aspect. As a whole, riding Grab offers a much safer and more comfortable experience. You don't get overcharged, Grab drivers don't take the long route, the AC is typically stronger, and it can be used 24/7. In terms of Grab rates, prices will vary depending on the distance of your destination and also the time of day that you book. If you've booked during the busiest time of the day like rush hour, expect your Grab to be a little bit more pricey. For example, say you're taking a 15-minute ride from BGC to Makati during rush hour. That'll cost you around 250 pesos or around $5. Without traffic, that ride will take you no longer than 10 minutes and cost you no more than 180 pesos or $3. All in all, Grab is relatively affordable, especially for the transportation experience that you get. Now, for the seventh form of transportation, which again isn't public, but it is very fast and very convenient, that is Angkas. Angkas is essentially like Grab, except it's a ride-hailing app for motorcycles. Rates with Angkas is far more affordable than Grab, and if you're in a rush, it's the fastest form of transportation. In my opinion, if I'm traveling alone, Angkas is the most reliable option to get around. Unlike Grab, where it's hard to get a booking during rush hour, with Angkas, you're more likely to get a booking accepted no matter what time of day. It's also much cheaper. For me, to take a 10-minute ride from BGC to Pasig, it doesn't cost any more than 150 pesos or around $3. And it's also my go-to option during rush hour, as Angkas drivers can easily weave through traffic. What may take Grab 30 minutes to get through traffic as a car, it'll take no more than 10 minutes with an Angkas. So not only is it cheap and reliable, but it's also the fastest way to get to your destination. However, the biggest factor about Angkas that you have to weigh out is the risk factor. As we all know, driving in the Philippines is like the Wild West. every man for themselves. So you can imagine, with congested traffic, unsafe drivers, and loose traffic laws, you're prone to getting into a bad accident with angkas. I've personally witnessed several motorcycle accidents just in BGC alone. So if we're talking safety, angkas is the last option I'd recommend because it is quite dangerous. It's up to you to weigh out if the accessibility, reliability, affordability, and quick travel time is worth the danger that you take on when you're riding in angkas. And so with that being said, that just about wraps up our full guide to public transportation in the Philippines. I hope you got a little bit out of this guide and it makes getting around the Philippines less intimidating and slightly easier. Once again, the link to our all-in-one BGC guide is down below. If you want to narrow down your thought process to see if BGC is a place to call home base and to see what the city has to offer, feel free to check it out down below. And so, thank you for watching Savvy Expats, and we will see you in the next video. God bless.